Hi guys. So for today's lesson, we're going to be dealing with simple interest. So a few words to understand. Well, the first one is this word interest. What does interest mean? You've probably heard of it before. Well, it's the cost when you borrow money. So obviously, if you're going to borrow money off someone, you're going to have to pay that money back. But you're also going to have to pay extra. You're going to have to pay an extra cost, and that cost is interest. So if you borrow money, you need to pay the money back plus this interest. If you invest money, however, so when you invest money, you're pretty much the person that's not giving the money away, but letting someone else borrow it. You will get your money back plus extra. So it's a bit of a win-win. So they get to borrow your money, and you get to pretty much get extra money for just lending it out, because you will get it back as well. The next word we need to understand is the principal. So it's the amount of money initially borrowed or invested. So it's pretty much how much you're borrowing. Principal is just another word for that. And it has the symbol P, don't forget that. The next up is the interest rate. So you would have heard of interest rates in the past. Well, it's pretty much just the annual, and annual means yearly, percentage rate of interest. So if that's a little bit confusing, this example might help you out here. So say if you have an interest rate of 10%, that means that you have to pay an extra 10% of the money that you borrow every single year. So for example, if you borrowed $5,000 and it's an interest rate of this 10%. So 10% of this $5,000, well, that's 10% is $500. You have to pay an extra $500 just in interest every single year. That's the idea of a 10% interest rate. So it's just 10% of the money you borrow, you have to pay that in interest. It's going to be an extra sort of payment. So the more money that you borrow, the more money you have to pay in interest, because it's all based on some sort of percentage. So that's what the interest rate is. So really high interest rates means that you're going to be paying heaps of interest each year. Low interest rates means you're going to be paying not too much in interest each year. Okay, so next word is simple interest. It's a type of interest which is fixed per year or month or week. It doesn't have to be paying interest every year. It could be every month, could be every week, it could be every day, etc. So it's a type of interest which is fixed per year or week or month. Its interest is calculated from this principal, how much you borrow. It's also known as a flat rate. Now, the main thing I want you to remember about simple interest is that there's a simple interest formula, and it is I equals PRN. I'm going to be saying this formula a lot, so you really got to remember it. That's the simple interest formula. The I represents the interest, the simple interest. The P represents the principal. The R here represents the interest rate, and that interest rate needs to be in decimal form. And N represents the number of time periods, which is usually just like the number of years, but it could be also the number of months, it could be the number of weeks, etc. Now, a really important idea with this I equals PRN is that the interest rate R must match the number of time periods. So e.g., they must both represent months or years, etc. They just got to match in their time. Okay, so let's do some examples to help us out with this. And also a rule to remember, a lot of questions will deal with the total, finding the total of an investment, or maybe how much you have to pay back in total when you borrow money. The total is going to be the interest that you have to pay or earn plus the original amount that was borrowed or invested. So it's the principal plus the interest to get the total. So a really important concept there. Okay, so some example questions. So, first up, $4,500 was borrowed for 3 years at an interest rate of 5% per annum. How much interest must be paid in the first year? So this is more a conceptual sort of question. How much interest has to be paid in just that first year alone? So we don't have to worry about the 3 years. We're just concerned with the first year here. Well, the idea of 5% per annum is 5% per year. So we're pretty much just finding 5% for this first year. Strategy, find 5% of this amount that we've borrowed, this principal. So the amount that we've borrowed was our $4,500. So we find 5% of our $4,500. 5% is the same as 0.05. We want to have it in decimal form. So remember, you can, if you've forgotten how to go from percentage to decimal, we can just, I'll use my pen, a little bit smaller. You just divide by 100. So 5 divided by, sorry, just get rid of that. 5% divided by 100, that equals our 0.05 here. And we get 0.05 multiplied by our principal, and that equals $225. So that's how much interest we need to pay in the first year alone. So it's a decent amount of money for just borrowing money, because we got to pay that back as well as the money we originally borrowed. Okay, so question B. How much interest must be paid in the total 3 years? So we're just concerned with how much interest we need to pay. Well, we know that was how much we paid in the first year, but what about over the 3 years? Okay, so when we're doing it over a long period of time, like 3 years, we can use this formula, I equals PRN. So our interest is what we're trying to find. Our principal is the amount that we borrowed, our $4,500. Our rate is 5%, and that's the same as 0.05. We want to use the decimal version. And our N is our 3-year time period. So remember, when these letters are next to each other, they're multiplying. We've got 4,500 times our 5% times our 3 years. We shove all that into a calculator and we get $775. That's how much interest we have to pay over the 3 years. Note, that's not the total that we have to pay back, but that's the extra that we have to pay back, including the money we originally borrowed. Note, another way to do this question, you could have literally just taken the amount that you found in the first year and just multiplied by 3 to get your amount for 3 years. So we could have just taken 225 times by 3, and we get our $775 answer for our total interest. So that's what the question's asking. We are done there. Okay, question 2. Next up, $70,000 is invested. So we're giving the money to someone else for 20 months at a flat rate of 4.25% per annum. So there's our interest rate. What will be the value of the investment after these 20 months? Okay, so again, 20 months, a decent amount of time. Let's use our formula, I equals PRN. Our principal is going to be the amount that we've invested, 70 grand. Our rate is going to be this 4.25%. We divide that by 100 and we can get the decimal version right there. That's the decimal version is the one we want to use for our formula. And then we've got N is the number of time periods. So in this case, it's 20 months. Important to note here that our rate was in years and our time periods is in months. They do not match. So what we do is we convert our 20 months into years. The way to do that is to think, well, how many months are in a year? And the answer is 12. So we pretty much divide our 20 by 12, or we can make a fraction, 20 months out of 12, because every single month makes 12 months makes up a year. So we're going to divide it by 12, and we can use that as a fraction, 20 over 12. So that is the number of years we're dealing with. So we can pretty much always make some sort of fraction with months by putting it over 12. And we get our number of years. Okay, so we're using these numbers here into our formula. So we've got 70,000 times our interest rate times the number of years there. And we get this as our answer. So that is our interest. And note that I'm using 2 decimal places because it is money. We've got to make sure that we're only dealing with dollars and cents. The question, however, was asking what will be the value of the investment. So our 70 grand, our investment's going to be going up and up because we're investing money. We hope that our 70 grand wouldn't fall all the way down to $4,958. But this is just the interest. This is the extra that we're earning. We have to add this amount on to our $70,000. So we plus it on here, and our total investment will go all the way up to $74,958. That amount of money has just been added onto our 70 grand to get our total investment. So our money, as you can see, is definitely going up by this interest amount. Question 3. $50,000 was borrowed for 6 years and 9 months. And $54,000 was repaid. What was the annual flat rate of interest for the loan? So the idea is, people, that amount was borrowed and that amount was repaid after the time period of 6 years and 9 months. So they give you how much, you can pretty much figure out how much interest was paid back over this time period, but we got to use this to figure out what exactly was the rate of interest. Okay, so the way to do this, we need to figure out what our R is. Our R is unknown. We don't know what the interest rate was, but we do know everything else. We can use the other information to figure out what our R is. So again, we go straight back to the formula, I equals PRN. Our interest, we need to figure out what our I is. Well, if we borrowed this much and we repaid this much, the difference between these two numbers here is going to be our interest. So the difference between our $54,000 and our $50,000 is $4,000. So this is the extra that we had to pay. That's the interest. So that is our I. Our I will change to 4,000 in our formula. The principal was the initial amount borrowed or invested, which is our $50,000 right here. Our R is unknown, so let it be X, an unknown value. And our N is 6 years and 9 months. Now this is a tricky one. We want to make sure that we're dealing with years, because our interest rate is usually in years. So we need to convert 6 years and 9 months to just years. The way to do that is to think, well, we do have 6 years, so we just write a 6 for those parts. The 9 months is going to be 9 out of 12. It's kind of like, think of it as 9 months out of a total of 12 months per year. So 9 over 12. So we're going to be dealing with this mixed fraction for our value of n, our time periods. Okay, so placing these values into our formula, I is 4,000, P is 50,000, our R is our X, our unknown value, and our N is 6 9/12. When you're putting this sort of value into your calculator, you do need to press Shift and then your fraction button, and then you'll be able to use a mixed you'll be able to place a mixed numeral into your calculator. And now we look at this equation and we need to get our X by itself by using opposite operations. So we need to remove the 50,000 away from X, and we need to move this away from X as well. They're both multiplying, so we need to be dividing both sides by these values to remove them. So we do these to both sides, so I'm going to divide them over here as well. And in our calculator, they will cancel, and we're going to be left with 4,000 divided by 50,000 divided by 6 9/12. And that will leave us with this number here, a lovely looking decimal. Now that is our interest rate in decimal form. Really important to understand, it's in decimal form. The way to go from decimal form to a percentage form is to now multiply by 100, and you get, that comes out as 1.16% to 2 decimal places. So that is our interest rate. Our final answer, we'll want it as a percentage because interest rates are typically percentages. Good luck with the questions. Bye.